The shuttle hummed softly as it descended through the thick atmosphere of the alien world. The city of Galvor below sprawled across a vast landscape of strange, shimmering towers. Captain James Orion sat in his seat, the tension in his body making the muscles ache. He could feel the weight of the mission pressing down on him. A human delegation was supposed to be meeting with the Zorn, an alien species infamous for their ruthless tactics. Yet they had agreed to negotiate peace, or so the reports said. Orion's mind drifted briefly to the wars back home, the constant struggle for survival, but he pushed those thoughts aside. This was different. This was diplomacy. This was hope. But somewhere in the pit of his stomach there was something else, an unspoken dread, a feeling that things were about to go terribly wrong. He glanced out the small window, his eyes narrowing as the shimmering city came into full view. There was something unsettling about the Zorn capital. The towers loomed like monuments to a people who had seen and done things that no one should ever witness. Their planet, once lush and green, now had a cold metallic sheen to it as if life had been sucked out of it long ago. It was a place where secrets festered in the dark corners of history, and the air itself seemed to carry an unspoken threat. Orion ran a hand over his face, shaking off the feeling. They were here to make peace. The war between humans and the Zorn had torn apart countless worlds, but now there was a chance, just a chance, that peace could be achieved. The shuttle's engines roared softly as it slowed, descending to a platform at the heart of the Zorn capital. Orion could see the heavy guards standing at attention, their eyes cold, unblinking. Their posture said it all. They didn't trust the humans. They didn't trust anyone. The shuttle doors hissed open and Orion stepped out, adjusting his uniform. He walked with purpose, but his heart raced in his chest, each step carrying the weight of everything on the line. His team followed him, a small group of diplomats, scientists, and soldiers, all with one goal: to ensure that the negotiations went smoothly. They had come to build bridges, to offer something better than the endless cycle of death and destruction. As they approached the grand hall where the negotiations would take place, Orion felt the eyes of the Zorn upon them. There was something unsettling about the way they watched, calculating, dissecting, judging every move. Their leader, a tall figure named General Ralek, stepped forward, his face a mask of stoic indifference. He offered a curt nod but said nothing, his piercing gaze scanning the humans like they were nothing more than insects under a microscope. The meeting began with formalities, pleasantries exchanged in cold, calculated tones, each word carefully measured. The humans spoke of peace, of rebuilding, of ending the war that had cost both sides so much. The Zorn in turn spoke of dominance, of the inevitable victory that awaited them. It was clear from the beginning that peace was not what the Zorn wanted. The meeting was a farce, a charade to buy time for something far more sinister. Orion could feel it in the pit of his stomach, that nagging sensation that told him something was wrong. Then, without warning, the doors slammed shut. The room was plunged into darkness, the sound of metal scraping against metal filling the air. The flickering lights above revealed the shadowy figures of Zorn soldiers, their faces hard and merciless. In a single horrifying moment, the truth was clear. The Zorn had never intended to make peace. They had been waiting for this moment, the moment when the humans were vulnerable, isolated in their negotiations. Orion's heart pounded as the first shots rang out, the sound deafening in the confined space. He dove behind the nearest table, his soldiers following his lead, drawing their weapons, but the Zorn were faster, more prepared. The room erupted into chaos, laser fire cutting through the air, blinding flashes of light that sent Orion's senses reeling. His soldiers fought valiantly, but the odds were against them. The Zorn were too many, their advanced technology too powerful. Orion felt a searing pain in his side as a blast hit him. He staggered, but the pain was momentary. A strange sensation washed over him, as though his body was already beginning to heal, the wound closing before he could even register the full extent of it. He staggered to his feet, blood dripping from his torn uniform, but there was no time to dwell on the injury. His mind was racing. He needed to get his team out of here, to find a way to survive, to warn Earth. But then, something unexpected happened. The Zorn soldiers stopped firing. The room fell silent. Orion's vision blurred and he fought to stay conscious, the world spinning around him. He could hear voices, Zorn voices, but they weren't speaking to him. They were speaking among themselves, their words sharp, filled with confusion and disbelief. One of the soldiers approached him, crouching down beside him. "What? What is wrong with you?" The voice was low, almost a whisper, but it carried a note of genuine fear. "You should be dead by now." Orion could barely lift his head, but he heard it clearly. The Zorn were afraid of him, of what he was becoming. They didn't understand, and neither did he. How could his body heal so quickly? What was happening to him? As darkness crept in at the edges of his vision, he had one thought. He had to survive. He had to survive and find out why the humans were different, why their biology was so strange. What was the secret behind them? What were the Zorn so afraid of? He didn't know the answer yet, but he knew one thing for sure. This was just the beginning, and the answers would change everything. The galaxy would never be the same again. Captain Orion's vision blurred as he struggled to stay conscious. His body was a battleground, each breath a painful reminder of the chaos that had unfolded. The room was quiet now, save for the soft hum of distant alarms, the flicker of overhead lights casting long shadows across the cold metal floor. The Zorn soldiers were gone, but something was wrong, deeply wrong. The burning pain in his side had vanished almost as soon as it had appeared, leaving only the lingering ache of his wounds. He reached down, expecting to feel blood, but his skin was whole, smooth as though he hadn't been shot at all. It was as if his body was healing before his very eyes. His head spun and he stumbled to his feet, steadying himself against the table. He could hear muffled voices outside the door, but they didn't sound like his people. The Zorn were speaking in their native tongue, their words fast and sharp. Orion tried to focus, but his vision kept fading, only to snap back again as though his body were fighting to hold on to something deeper. He closed his eyes, struggling to make sense of what was happening. The door slid open with a hiss and a figure entered. Orion's heart skipped a beat, recognizing the tall alien woman in front of him. Princess Solara, a former enemy of the humans, stood there, her eyes wide with disbelief. She was one of the Zorn's most feared leaders, known for her ruthlessness in battle. But there was no fear in her eyes now, only a strange mix of curiosity and something else, something Orion couldn't quite place. "You should be dead," she said, her voice low, almost in awe. Orion's breath came in shallow gasps, and he forced himself to stand tall, despite the fog clouding his mind. "I don't understand," he managed, his voice hoarse. Why am I still alive?" Solara's gaze flicked over him, her sharp alien eyes studying every inch of his body. She took a step closer, her face tense, the lines of her jaw tightening. "The wound should have killed you, but it didn't. It didn't even slow you down." Orion took a shaky breath. "What is happening to me?" The princess hesitated, her eyes flicking to the door as though listening for someone. "The Zorn don't know," she said quietly. We don't understand it. The soldiers, their reports, they said your body was regenerating at an impossible rate. Healing faster than anything we've ever seen. We've studied dozens of species, Captain, but your biology, there's something in it that no one expected." Orion staggered, almost falling, but Solara caught him, steadying him with surprising gentleness. She looked down at him, her eyes filled with something Orion had never seen before. Concern. For a moment, the hardness that had defined her in his mind seemed to crack, just enough for him to see the person beneath. "I don't know what's happening," she whispered, almost to herself. "But the Zorn are afraid. We've been watching you, studying your kind ever since you first encountered us. You should have been an easy enemy, just another weak species to conquer. But you're different. We never counted on this, you humans. You adapt. You survive. You fight back in ways no one expected." Orion's mind was spinning, his thoughts tangled in confusion. He tried to process her words, but they felt like fragments of a puzzle he couldn't solve. Why did you bring us here then? If the Zorn are so afraid, why? Solara's expression darkened. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she turned away, pacing across the room, her footsteps echoing in the silence. Orion watched her, every part of him screaming for answers, but she wasn't speaking. The tension between them grew thick, the silence pressing down like an invisible weight. Finally, she stopped, turning back to him with a sharp look in her eyes. "The Zorn are not afraid of humans in the way you think," she said, her voice cold again. "We fear what you could become. We fear that you might be more than just a species, that you might be something else." Orion shook his head, still lost. "Something else? What are you talking about?" The princess stepped closer, her voice barely a whisper. The Zorn were the first to master survival through force. We conquered and dominated, bred armies to fight, to survive. But there is a power in you humans that we never understood. Your ability to endure, to grow stronger from the very things that should break you. We thought it was just luck or coincidence. But now I think it's something more. Your biology, your evolution. It's as if you were designed for something far greater than anything we imagined. Her words sent a shiver down Orion's spine. Designed by who? Solara's eyes were distant now, her gaze far away, as if she were seeing something beyond the walls of the room, beyond the war, beyond everything. I don't know. But I think the answer is hidden in your DNA, in the very cells of your body. Something ancient, something that shouldn't exist. And the Zorn, they want it. They want to unlock it, to control it. The words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Orion's heart pounded in his chest, the weight of her words sinking in. The truth, as much as he hated it, was clear now. He wasn't just fighting for his life. He was fighting for something far bigger, something the Zorn wanted, something the entire galaxy might never understand. Solara reached out, her hand brushing against his arm, and for the first time since he'd met her, Orion felt the touch was genuine, a silent connection in the chaos. She looked at him, and for the first time her eyes softened. "I can help you, Captain," she said quietly. "But you must trust me." Orion stared into her eyes, his mind racing. He didn't know if he could trust her, but there was no other choice. Not anymore. He had to find out what was happening to him. He had to uncover the truth. "I don't have a choice, do I?" he whispered. Solara didn't answer, but her silence spoke volumes. The galaxy was changing, and humanity was at the center of it all. What the Zorn didn't know, what neither side understood, was that the real war was only just beginning. Orion woke to the sound of whispers, soft, low murmurs that seemed to come from every corner of the room. His body ached as though he had been through 1,000 battles, and yet somehow he felt different. He sat up slowly, the dull pain in his side gone, his skin smooth and unmarked as though it had never been wounded. His mind was still foggy, the edges of reality blurred, but one thought pierced through it all. What is happening to me? The room around him was dim, the walls covered in alien symbols he couldn't understand, flickering lights above casting eerie shadows. He looked around, his eyes falling on Princess Solara, standing near the doorway, her back turned. She was staring at something, her eyes distant as though lost in thought. The usual cold, calculating expression she wore was gone, replaced by something far more vulnerable, far more human. For a moment, Orion wondered if he was imagining things. "You're awake," she said without turning, her voice barely more than a whisper. Orion's throat felt dry, and he cleared it before speaking. "What's going on? Why do I feel like this? Like I'm not the same person anymore?" Solara turned to face him, her eyes searching his face. "You're not the same person anymore," she said softly, as if the words were as much a revelation to her as they were to him. "And neither are your people." She stepped closer, her movements graceful, almost hesitant. "The Zorn. We've studied many species, but humans, they're something else entirely. You're not just surviving, Captain. You're changing. Your biology, your evolution, it's accelerating in ways no one can explain." Orion stood, his legs shaky but steady enough to keep him upright. "Changing into what? And why now?" Solara's gaze flickered to the floor, her fingers twitching at her sides as though she were resisting the urge to touch him, to offer comfort. "I don't know. But I think this change is connected to something ancient, something that's been buried deep within your DNA for centuries. You humans, you've been evolving in secret, and the Zorn never realized what you were capable of until now." The words hung in the air like an unanswered question. Orion's heart raced, his mind scrambling for answers, but they kept slipping away, just out of reach. He took a step forward, closing the distance between them, his voice trembling with frustration. "What do you mean? What's buried in our DNA?" Solara looked at him, her eyes narrowing as if she were weighing her next words carefully. "I don't know the full answer, Captain. But I know this, the Zorn are afraid of you. Not because you're weak, but because you're not. You're something they never expected. Something they can't control." Orion's pulse quickened. "But why? Why would they want to control us?" Solara's eyes softened for a moment, and she hesitated before answering. The Zorn are an ancient race, and they have spent centuries conquering worlds, eliminating anything they consider a threat. But they've never encountered a species like yours. You humans. You're resilient. Your biology, it adapts, it heals, it grows stronger under pressure. It's like your entire species was designed for survival, for battle, for something greater than what we can see. The words were almost too much to comprehend. Orion felt a chill run down his spine, the weight of her words pressing down on him. He wasn't just part of a species fighting for survival. He was part of something bigger, something that had been hidden for eons. Solara took a step closer, her eyes locking onto his. You're not just a soldier, Captain. You're part of a plan, something far older than the Zorn. And the key to everything is in your biology, in your cells. Orion felt his breath catch in his chest. What are you saying? That we were designed? Solara nodded slowly. Yes, I don't know by whom or why, but your species was created for something. You were engineered to endure, to fight, to survive in a galaxy that never gave you a chance. And now the Zorn have come to realize that they can't control what they can't understand. They're desperate to unlock the secrets of your biology. They want to know how you heal so quickly, how you adapt so easily. They want to harness it for themselves. Orion took a step back, his mind reeling. This wasn't just a war for survival anymore. This was something far bigger, far more dangerous. The Zorn weren't just enemies, they were afraid. They feared what humans could become if they unlocked the secrets hidden deep within their genes. You said the Zorn are afraid of us, Orion said, his voice barely above a whisper. But what happens if they find out what's really hidden in us? What if they use it against us? Solara's expression darkened, her lips pressed into a tight line. That's exactly what they'll do. The Zorn have no understanding of what they're dealing with. If they manage to unlock the full potential of human biology, they will use it to conquer the galaxy, to control everything. And that's why you can't let them find out. You have to stop them before it's too late. Orion's mind spun, the weight of her words sinking in like a stone. The fate of humanity wasn't just in his hands. It was in the hands of a secret buried deep within their very DNA. A secret that could either save them or destroy them, all. I don't know how to stop them, he said quietly, his voice heavy with the burden of the truth. I don't even know what I'm supposed to do. Solara's eyes softened, and for the first time since he'd met her, he saw a glimmer of something else in her gaze. Something that wasn't fear, but understanding. You don't have to do it alone, Captain. I'll help you. Together we can uncover the truth. But you need to trust me. And you need to act fast. The Zorn are already moving. They won't wait. Orion looked at her, the tension in his chest rising. He didn't know if he could trust her, but the reality was that he had no choice. The Zorn were coming, and they were not just after victory. They were after something far worse. He had to stop them. He had to find the answers. All right, he said, his voice steadying. I'll trust you. But we're running out of time. Solara nodded. Then we must act now. Orion felt the weight of his decision settle over him. The galaxy had always been a place of danger, of war and survival. But now it was a place of secrets, secrets that could change everything. And with those secrets, he was about to embark on a journey that would take him farther than he had ever imagined. The truth was out there, buried deep within humanity. And whatever it was worth fighting for. Orion stood at the edge of the Zorn compound, the distant stars flickering like cold diamonds against the dark sky. He could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on him, heavy as a storm cloud. The air was thick with tension, the world around him seeming to hold its breath, waiting for something that he didn't fully understand. His mind raced, each thought a frantic echo in the back of his head. How had everything escalated so quickly? What had started as a diplomatic mission now felt like the beginning of a battle for the very soul of humanity. Princess Solara stood beside him, her eyes scanning the landscape with a sharpness that made Orion feel like a child, lost and uncertain. Her presence, once a symbol of hostility, now felt like an anchor, something solid in the midst of chaos. But even she seemed uneasy, her usually confident posture now tinged with something more fragile, something that spoke of a past filled with secrets and betrayal. You're sure about this? Orion's voice was low, but the question carried the weight of 1,000 doubts. Solara didn't answer immediately. She only stared ahead, her gaze distant like she was looking at something far beyond the horizon. The Zorn were closing in on them, their forces growing by the hour. The pressure was unbearable. Every move they made was being watched, every decision scrutinized. And yet the stakes were higher than ever. If they failed, it wouldn't just mean the end of their mission. It would mean the end of everything humanity had fought for. The Zorn were on the brink of unlocking the truth hidden within Orion's biology, and that truth, he feared, could destroy them all. "I've been trying to make sense of it all," Solara said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Trying to understand why the humans were created this way. Why you have this gift, this power that no one else possesses. The Zorn, they don't see it the way we do. They think they can control it, but they don't understand what it truly means." Orion turned his head, meeting her gaze. There was something in her eyes now, something that hadn't been there before. It was understanding, maybe even a trace of empathy. She wasn't just the enemy anymore. She wasn't just the leader of the, Zorn. She was something else, someone who had seen enough of the galaxy's dark secrets to know that the line between good and evil was never as simple as it seemed. "Tell me what you know," Orion urged, his voice urgent, desperate. He needed answers. Needed to understand what was happening to him, to his people, to the entire galaxy. Solara glanced at him, her eyes clouded with uncertainty. "I don't have all the answers," she said softly. "But I know this much. The humans were never meant to be a part of this galaxy. You weren't supposed to survive, let alone thrive. But something happened, something that changed everything, and the Zorn, they've been searching for that something ever since. The truth is, you humans, your biology, it's not just the key to survival. It's the key to something far bigger. And the Zorn want it. They want to control it. But they don't realize that doing so would destroy everything." Orion felt a chill wash over him as her words sank in. The truth was even darker than he had imagined. It wasn't just about the humans surviving. It wasn't just about their ability to heal or adapt. The very essence of their biology was a weapon, a power that could change the course of the entire galaxy. And if the Zorn got their hands on it, Orion couldn't even begin to imagine what would happen. It was as though they were standing on the edge of a cliff, the darkness below them threatening to swallow them whole. "I didn't ask for this," he said, his voice tight with emotion. "I didn't ask to be a part of whatever this is. I didn't ask to carry this burden." Solara looked at him, her expression softening. For the first time, he saw the weight she carried too. She wasn't just an enemy. She was a leader who had been shaped by the same galaxy, the same endless cycle of war and survival. She understood the cost of every decision, the lives lost in the name of power. "I know," she said quietly, "but sometimes the burden finds you whether you want it or not. You're not alone in this, Captain. I'm with you. I always have been." For a moment, the world seemed to stand still. The noise of the Zorn forces, the distant hum of the machinery, all faded into the background. Orion stood there, his heart pounding as the realization hit him. The fate of humanity, of the galaxy, rested in his hands. He wasn't just fighting for his survival anymore. He was fighting for something far bigger. He was fighting for the very soul of humanity. "We can't let them have it," Orion said, his voice filled with resolve. "We can't let the Zorn control it. Whatever it is, we need to stop them before it's too late." Solara nodded. "We will, but it won't be easy. The Zorn won't stop until they have what they want. We'll have to fight, and we'll have to fight smart. This isn't just a war for territory anymore. It's a war for everything." The tension in the air thickened, the weight of their mission pressing down on them both. The battle ahead wouldn't be just about weapons or strategy. It would be about something far more dangerous. It would be about trust, about the secrets hidden within their very beings, and about the consequences of revealing those secrets to the galaxy. Orion took a deep breath, steadying himself. "Then let's make sure they don't get what they want." As they turned toward the looming battlefield ahead, the world seemed to shift beneath their feet. The stars above, once distant and unreachable, now seemed to watch them as though they were part of something much bigger, something that was just beginning to unfold. The Zorn might have the power, the technology, and the numbers, but humanity had something they could never understand. They had the will to survive, the strength to adapt, and the will to fight for their place in the galaxy, and in the end, that would be what made all the difference. The sound of battle echoed in the distance, a constant hum that seemed to vibrate through the very ground they stood on. Orion stood at the edge of the battlefield, his eyes fixed on the horizon where the first wave of Zorn soldiers was advancing. The air was thick with tension, the stench of fear and anticipation clinging to the atmosphere. His heart raced, but there was no time for hesitation. He had no choice now. The fate of everything he knew rested on what happened in the next few hours. Beside him, Solara stood, her eyes narrowed, her expression hard as stone. She had been his reluctant ally from the moment they had decided to fight back, but now she was something more. She was a leader, a warrior, someone who had made a choice. And so had he. He had chosen to fight for humanity, to protect the very thing that made them who they were no matter the cost. The Zorn were coming in full force. Their advanced weaponry blazed like fire against the darkened sky. A terrifying display of power. The sight sent a chill through Orion, but he refused to let fear control him. He couldn't afford to let it. The Zorn were about to unlock the secret buried within human biology. The very secret that could give them unimaginable power. But if they succeeded, if they gained control of what humans were capable of, it wouldn't just be the end of the war. It would be the end of everything. And they couldn't let that happen. Not after everything they had already lost. "We need to move," Solara said, her voice low but firm. "The Zorn will be here soon." Orion nodded, his mind racing. "We're ready. The soldiers are in position and we have one chance at this. If we don't succeed, humanity won't just fall. It will vanish. The Zorn will take everything we fought for." Solara's eyes met his, and for a brief moment the world around them seemed to fade away. There was no longer a divide between them, no longer the animosity of old. They were on the same side now, fighting the same enemy, fighting for the same cause. She didn't need to say anything. The weight of the situation spoke louder than words ever could. They moved quickly, slipping through the shadows of the battlefield, their footsteps almost silent as they approached the heart of the Zorn's position. Orion's pulse thrummed in his ears, his mind sharpening into focus. His soldiers were ready, but the Zorn had numbers, technology, and the one thing that could turn the tide in their favor, the knowledge they were after. But what the Zorn didn't know was that their search for power was about to destroy them. Orion's breath caught as he saw the Zorn command center in the distance. It loomed ahead like a dark monolith, a symbol of everything the Zorn had worked to build, but now it was their greatest vulnerability. He could see the flashing lights and hear the hum of energy shields, the buzz of alien technology that was both familiar and foreign to him. He had fought against the Zorn for so long, but this time was different. This time the stakes were higher than ever. "They're here," Solara whispered, her hand resting on her weapon. Her voice was steady, but there was something in her eyes, a flicker of uncertainty. Even she, with all her strength, couldn't shake the fear that lurked beneath the surface. Orion nodded, his grip tightening on his own weapon. "Stay close. If we don't take them out now, everything is lost." They pushed forward, weaving through the maze of alien structures, their movements swift, calculated. Every corner, every shadow could hide a Zorn soldier, and they couldn't afford to make a single mistake. Orion's heart pounded in his chest, but he kept his focus sharp, watching for any sign of movement. They were getting closer. He could feel it in his bones. As they neared the command center, the ground beneath them trembled, the sound of Zorn war machines getting louder with every passing second. The first wave of soldiers had arrived. The battle was about to begin. "Now," Orion said, his voice a low growl. They moved as one, silent as ghosts. Orion felt the rush of adrenaline, his instincts kicking in as they neared the heart of the Zorn's operations. His breath came faster, the weight of the mission pressing down on him. He had trained for moments like this, but nothing could prepare him for the reality of it, the sheer force of the stakes, the understanding that the survival of humanity hung by the thinnest thread. They reached the command center's outer perimeter, and Orion signaled for his team to split up. Every moment was critical. Every decision could mean life or death. They moved with purpose, setting charges, taking out Zorn sentries, making their way into the heart of the operation. The Zorn were too focused on their advanced weaponry to notice the humans slipping through their defenses. It wasn't until they reached the control room that things began to unravel. The Zorn were ready for them. Their elite soldiers were waiting, weapons raised, eyes narrowed in cold anticipation. Orion's heart slammed in his chest as the first shots rang out. The room exploded into chaos. Laser fire filled the air, bright streaks of light illuminating the darkened chamber. Orion dove for cover, his ears ringing with the sound of battle. He could hear the soldiers shouting, the clashing of metal against metal, the thrum of energy weapons as they discharged into the walls. But even amidst the chaos, Orion's mind was focused. He had to stop them. He had to make sure they didn't unlock the secret that lay hidden within humanity. His body moved on its own, a blur of action as he took out one Zorn soldier after another, his training kicking in as if it were second nature. He didn't have time to think. There was only the fight, only the mission. The tension was unbearable, the world around him blurring into a haze of chaos. And then, just as the Zorn were about to close in, something unexpected happened. The control room began to tremble, the walls shaking with an intensity that sent a jolt of panic through his chest. The Zorn soldiers paused, confusion flashing across their faces as they looked around, unsure of what was happening. And then, a voice echoed in Orion's mind, low and steady. "It's happening." He didn't know where it came from or what it meant, but he felt the truth in his bones. The secret was about to be unlocked, and if they didn't act fast, it would be too late. The Zorn wouldn't just learn about human biology, they would control it. And if they controlled it, the galaxy would never be the same again. With one final surge of determination, Orion sprang into action. He had one chance to save everything, and he wasn't going to let it slip away. The room was a blur of flashing lights and the distant sound of heavy machinery, but Orion's mind was focused. His heart pounded in his chest as he watched the control panel flicker, the alien symbols on it dancing like fireflies, taunting him with their mystery. He could feel the tension building, a weight that pressed down on him with every second that passed. The Zorn were closing in. They had no idea what was about to happen, but Orion knew. He could feel it in his bones. Whatever was hidden inside him, inside humanity, was about to be unlocked, and if the Zorn discovered it, there would be no turning back. He moved quickly, his hands shaking as he worked to disable the control system. His mind raced with calculations, his every movement deliberate yet instinctive. He had trained for moments like this, but there was no training for the pressure that weighed down on him now. The fate of humanity rested on his ability to stop this. He had one chance to ensure that the Zorn didn't succeed in gaining control of the power buried in human biology. Solara was by his side, her face set with a grim determination. She didn't need to speak. Her presence was enough. They were in this together, and the weight of their shared mission was clear in the way they moved, in the silent understanding that passed between them. She stood watch, her eyes scanning the room, alert to every sound, every movement. The Zorn were not far behind, and they had to act quickly. Orion's hands moved faster, the beeping of the control panel growing louder in his ears as the countdown began. The seconds seemed to stretch on forever, each one feeling like an eternity. His pulse quickened. He could feel the sweat beginning to form on his brow, his breath coming in shallow gasps as he worked to override the Zorn security systems. And then, just as the countdown hit its final seconds, the control room door slammed open with a deafening noise, and Zorn soldiers poured in, their weapons raised. The room erupted into chaos. Orion barely had time to react. The first blast from a Zorn weapon hit the wall beside him, sending a shower of sparks into the air. He dove for cover, his mind racing with adrenaline. Solara was already on the move, firing her weapon with deadly precision, her every move fluid and calculated. The Zorn soldiers were formidable, but they were no match for the combined force of a human and a Zorn who had fought side by side. "Keep them back," Orion shouted, his voice barely audible over the cacophony of explosions and gunfire. "I'm almost there." He could feel the power surging within him, a strange energy pulsing through his veins. The wound in his side, which should have been a crippling injury, had long since healed. His body was responding to the stress in ways he couldn't fully understand, the human ability to adapt and survive kicking into overdrive. It was like his very DNA was fighting alongside him, urging him to keep going, to push harder. The Zorn were closing in, their weapons blindingly fast, their tactics cold and efficient. But Orion and Solara were faster, more determined. They weren't just fighting for their lives, they were fighting for the future of humanity. Each shot fired, each enemy that fell, was one step closer to ensuring that humanity's secret stayed hidden, that the Zorn couldn't unlock the power that would destroy them all. Orion's mind snapped back to the task at hand. The control panel. He had to finish it. The countdown had stopped, but the Zorn weren't giving them any more time. He pushed himself to his feet, ignoring the sharp pain in his legs as he sprinted back to the panel. His hands moved quickly, typing in the final commands to destroy the system. to wipe out any trace of the information the Zorn had been trying to access. The room was chaos now. Solara was beside him, holding off the Zorn soldiers with expert precision, but even she was beginning to tire. They were outnumbered and the Zorn were relentless. Orion could hear the Zorn general barking orders, the unmistakable sound of heavy boots marching closer, a signal that reinforcements were on the way. They had moments, maybe less. He slammed his hand down on the final key, the screen flashing with a burst of light, and then silence. The countdown had stopped. The data was gone, but it wasn't over. A sharp hiss of air sounded, and the walls of the control room began to shift, the floor vibrating beneath them as the Zorn began to activate their self-destruct sequence. They had failed. The Zorn were going to blow everything to pieces, taking them all down with it. "We've got to move," Solara shouted, her voice urgent. Orion didn't need any further prompting. He grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the door. The room was already shaking, the walls beginning to crack and groan under the pressure of the countdown. The sound of the Zorn soldiers' footsteps grew louder, closer, and they had no time to lose. The hall outside the control room was eerily quiet, the shadows long and twisted in the dim light. They sprinted down the corridor, their footsteps echoing in the emptiness until they reached the hangar. The shuttle was waiting, but it felt like a lifetime away, as though the whole world had conspired to keep them from reaching it. Orion could feel the heat of the Zorn's weapons on his back, their fire trailing behind them like a storm. Solara glanced over at him, her expression unreadable, but there was something in her eyes, a flicker of something that might have been hope. Or maybe it was just the exhaustion settling in. Either way, they had no choice but to push forward. "We're almost there," Solara said, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. Orion nodded, but his mind was already racing. The Zorn were still out there, and they weren't going to stop until they had everything. The battle wasn't over, not yet. There was still one last chance. One final fight, and they would have to face it together. The shuttle was in sight now, the engines already warming up, ready to take them to safety. But even as Orion ran toward it, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The Zorn had failed to get what they wanted, but that didn't mean they were finished. It wasn't over. The fight for humanity's survival was far from over. The shuttle rocketed through the atmosphere, the violent shake of re-entry vibrating through Orion's body. His grip on the armrest was the only thing holding him in place as the ship twisted and turned, breaking free of the alien world's gravity. Outside, the sky burned with the last remnants of battle, the distant explosions lighting up the dark horizon like fireworks in the void. For a moment, everything felt surreal, like they were escaping into another world, a world where the chaos of the past few days didn't exist. But that thought was fleeting. The truth of what they had just done, what they had narrowly avoided, sank deep into Orion's bones. The fight wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Beside him, Solara was silent, her face still and unreadable. She had been his ally, his guide through this nightmare, but the weight of everything they had just endured hung between them like an unspoken truth. She had her own burdens to carry, her own past to reconcile, but now wasn't the time to ask her about it. Now they had to focus on what lay ahead, what they had to do to keep the Zorn from destroying everything they had fought for. "We did it," Orion said, his voice hoarse, barely a whisper over the hum of the shuttle's engines. He couldn't bring himself to believe it. Not yet. Solara's eyes flicked to him, her expression unreadable, but there was a hardness in her gaze, a truth she wasn't ready to share. She nodded slowly. "We stopped them for now, but the Zorn will come for us. They will never stop hunting for what we've hidden." Orion swallowed hard, his throat dry. The words had the same impact as a punch to the chest. He had known it was coming, but hearing it from her made it real. The Zorn wouldn't stop, not until they had unlocked the secret within humanity, the power that had been hidden for so long. They hadn't won yet. They had only survived one battle, and with that survival came the terrible knowledge that a far greater war was coming. "We have to warn Earth," he said, his voice growing stronger, more determined. "We have to make them understand what's at stake. We can't let them fall into the same trap we almost did." Solara didn't answer immediately, her eyes drifting back to the starry expanse outside the shuttle's window. The stars stretched out before them, distant and cold, each one a reminder of how small they were in the grand scheme of things. But it wasn't about the stars. It was about the people they had left behind, the lives they had saved, and the ones still at risk, "We'll find a way," she said at last, her voice steady, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes, an emotion she hadn't allowed herself to feel until now. "We'll make sure the Zorn never get what they want." Orion nodded, though the weight of her words lingered in the air. He wasn't so sure it would be that simple. The Zorn were relentless, and they had only begun to scratch the surface of what humanity was capable of. He could feel the weight of it, the burden of what was hidden within them pressing down on his shoulders. The truth was dangerous. It was powerful. And if it ever fell into the wrong hands, it would be more than just the end of humanity. It would be the end of everything. The shuttle continued to climb higher, breaking free from the gravity of the planet. And yet Orion's mind remained tethered to the world they had just left behind. He thought about the Zorn general, the look of fear in his eyes as their plan crumbled, and how it had all led to this moment. The Zorn weren't just trying to conquer a planet. They were after something far more dangerous, something that could change the course of the entire galaxy. He glanced at Solara again, his thoughts racing. She was still watching the stars, her face a mask of resolve. "What happens now?" he asked. "How do we stop them from coming back?" Solara turned to him, her gaze steady, unwavering. "We do what we always do. We fight. We fight until the Zorn understand that they cannot control what they cannot comprehend. We make sure they never uncover the secret of humanity's biology, and we make sure that no one else can either." Orion's heart clenched. He understood what she was saying, but it didn't feel like enough. It wasn't just about fighting. It was about survival. It was about holding on to the very thing that made humanity unique, the thing that gave them the strength to endure against all odds. The Zorn didn't understand it, but they were learning. And the more they learned, the more dangerous they became. The galaxy had no idea what was coming. But Orion and Solara did. They had seen the future. And it was a future that would be shaped by the very thing the Zorn had tried to control. "We'll need help," Orion said, his voice firm now, resolute. "We can't do this alone." Solara looked at him for a long moment, her eyes narrowing as though she were weighing his words. Finally she nodded. "I know. And I know who can help, but we'll need to move quickly. The Zorn are already planning their next move, and they won't stop until they have everything." Orion felt the weight of the words, but something else stirred inside him, a spark of hope, however small. They had survived the first wave. They had held the line, and now they had to prepare for the next one. The stakes were higher than ever, but so was their resolve. The shuttle passed into the darkness of space, the stars growing faint as they moved farther from the world they had just left. But for Orion, the journey wasn't over. The battle wasn't over. It had only just begun. The future was uncertain. The path ahead a twisting road that was impossible to predict. But one thing was clear. Humanity would not go down without a fight. They would survive. They would adapt. And they would make sure the Zorn knew that they had underestimated the strength of the human spirit. Orion sat back in his seat, staring into the vastness of space. He didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain. He was ready for whatever came next. The fight for humanity's future was far from over, and he would not let it slip away.